Andrew Urquhart with you on the program today. Sticking with politics, in fact, the Community Housing Aotearoa, the annual conference, was a couple of weeks ago. Housing Minister Chris Bishop was one of the speakers, talking about some policy change announcements at that conference. Senior lender from Christian Savings, Andy Milne, joins us. Andy, kia ora, good morning.
Well, Andrew, great to be with you.
This is an area which, there's quite a few faith-based or church-based groups involved with community housing initiatives of one sort or another. And, of course, Christian Savings deeply invested, literally, in some of these initiatives as well. So, I mean, any policy change in this area affects a lot of people that you know and work with.
Well, that's right, Andrew. And look, we're greatly encouraged. The groups that we talk to, they're cautiously optimistic about the language that Chris Bishop, Minister of Housing, has been using. So, as you say, he spoke at a conference recently for Community Housing Aotearoa, and where he signalled, wanting to, boost the number of, charitable housing, housing providers in the sector. So at the moment, Kāinga Ora is New Zealand's largest residential landlord. They operate something like 72,000 homes. Charitable sector, something like about 14,000. So a lot, probably 20% the size of KO. Yep. So the government is very keen to see the charitable sector step up and shoulder more of the burden, I guess, if you like, but also recognising that the government needs to level the playing field with Kāinga Ora who have access to government funding. So he's talking about the fact that the government are exploring a range of options, which might include changes to the income-related rent subsidy. So that's the subsidies that both Kāinga Ora and charitable housing providers, community housing providers receive. Things that might involve capitalising, instead of receiving a monthly subsidy, being able to capitalise that upfront as a deposit into a development, which would mean that the community housing provider is borrowing less money. So things like that, increases to the income-related rent subsidies. Also, moves from the Reserve Bank to make debt cheaper. So at the moment, the way the Reserve Bank regulates or risk weights, those kind of large property developments, makes it harder for providers to borrow those money. So, and one thing that he floated, that they may explore in the future would be, providing government guarantees in this kind of space. So reasons for cautious optimism. I think the key message from the government is that they are keen to see that they recognise that Kāinga Ora isn't the only show in town.
Yep.
And that the charitable sector and in particular the faith-based sector has a really strong role to play. So overall, we think it's good news.
Well, I mean, there's very good news. Not only saying, hey, we're keen to see this happening, but removing some of the obstacles to investment in that area and even incentivising that. I mean, of course, as I mentioned, Christian Savings very involved with this. Is the government trying to muscle in on your territory in this regard in providing financial support to faith-based groups wanting to do housing developments? I mean,
not at all. What I think the government is saying is that they will, remove some of the barriers that stop community housing providers, charitable housing providers, accessing finance. So rather than the government providing funding themselves, they're going to remove some regulatory barriers or change some of the settings, which will hopefully make financing cheaper and attracting equity investment into these projects more attractive for long-term investors as well.
So, I mean, that is generally good news, and actually, is it likely to make the difference not just for people who are already involved in the sector, but for Christian organisations or perhaps larger churches to say, hey, this is something that we've thought about but never really thought that we commit to, that may be able to explore whether or not that would be an area of social development or social support that they could provide as a faith community?
Well, yes, Possibly it is. It's too soon to tell. I mean, at the moment we haven't got much more than good intentions
Yeah.
from the government. So we wait to see more detail. But yeah, potentially it would. I mean, we hear feedback from a large number of independent and denominational churches who have large land holdings where they're basically mowing the lawns for Jesus on a weekly basis. They have a lot of land, and they're looking for ways that they can use that to benefit the community more directly. So this may make some of these projects more viable, but we would encourage those churches to contact us, and we can put them in contact with people that can help you with develop feasibility cases, feasibility studies, and plan out whether this is something that is right for your church and your community.
Because, of course, you're already connected with a range of different housing providers in this sector. And I suppose this is the big difference between, normally in the banking sector or in the land development sector, it's fiercely competitive, and it's one person against the other person. And if somebody else is successful, then that's bad news for their competitors. That's not the way the kingdom of God works. That's not the way Christian Savings works. It's like, hey, let's grow generally the pool of availability. Let's grow the kingdom of God together. It's a different business ethic, isn't it?
100%. We're interested in seeing the kingdom of God grow here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and that's through direct investment in or lending to churches, but also to social programs, to organisations that are acting as the hands and feet of God, spreading the gospel throughout the country.
I love that metaphor. That's one that's going to stick with me for a while, is that mowing the lawns for Jesus thing. If people are listening to that, especially as we're heading into summer, if they'd like to move out of the mowing the lawns for Jesus ministry and into perhaps providing social housing for people doing it tough in their local communities, perhaps start with a conversation with the good people at Christian Savings, Andy.
Yes, we'd certainly welcome a conversation with any church or community group that is interested in looking at unlocking housing in their community. Definitely keen to talk about how we might be able to help make that happen.
Of course, finding out more at christiansavings.co.nz. Thanks so much for the work that you and your team do. Isn't it nice to have some good news this side of Christmas? Andy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.